Neither the El Paso Medical Society, its members, nor PBS El Paso shall be responsible for the views, opinions, or facts expressed by the panelists on this television program. Please consult your doctor.
In order to prevent the spread of the virus, we all need to do our part. One of the easiest ways to prevent that is by wearing a mask. In order for a mask to do its job, it needs to cover your nose, your mouth, and your chin. First, you should wash your hands with either sanitizer or soap and water before putting on a mask. Then pick up your mask by one of the ear loops to make sure that there's no tears or stains on the mask. If it is dirty, throw it away immediately. If it's intact, take both loops and put it over your ears like this, and then press down on the bridge of the nose to make sure that it fits and there are no gaps. Once you are done with the mask, please take it off the same way. Both ear loops, pull it away, and put it either in a Ziploc bag or throw it away if it's a surgical mask. If it's a cloth mask, make sure to wash it with soap and water and keep it dry for the next use. Do not put your mask down at your chin or above on your forehead when you are starting to remove it, as that just contaminates the mask. Thank you so much for doing your part to prevent the spread throughout the city.
And thank you, Dr. Days. And again, there's one thing that I always like to say because I see it everywhere. There's one thing that she didn't cover, but if you find that your mask is doing this, take your fingers on the bottom of your mask and bring it up. Don't touch your face as you're bringing your mask up. I thought I would add that in there. Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. That's what we're hearing about. An hour and a half ago, there's more information about vaccines. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, there is, but we're not there yet. There's a lot of very, very important things that we still need to do. There's a vaccine that's been around for a very, very long time, but it's not getting a lot of love right now, and that's the simple, good old-fashioned flu vaccine. You have to get it. Get it. It's important. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight because we don't want combined viruses going on with you. You don't want to be that person who's infected with both COVID and also has influenza, the regular flu at the same time. Both are respiratory viruses. However, there's a lot of other organs that can be affected. Your heart can be affected drastically, and we're going to talk about that this evening too. We have differences between the COVID and the flu, and again, there's questions to be asked. Give us a call. It's a live program, 881-0013. Again, 881-0013. This program is underwritten by the American Heart Association. And we also want to thank Texas Tech Paulo Foster School of Medicine for providing our lone wolf this evening. We have Kirsten Holmstoffer, and she's here today. She's going to answer your questions. Actually, she's going to put her questions down, text them our way, and then we're going to answer them for you. But give her some love. Give her a call. Again, 881-0013. And also a huge thank you to the El Paso County Medical Society for bringing the show to you for 23 years. Good evening. I'm Catherine Berg, and you're watching the El Paso Physician. Catherine Berg once here again. This is a special edition, yet another special edition of the El Paso Physician. We're going to be talking about COVID-19 and the flu, avoiding the double trouble. So we have two infectious disease docs with us this evening. We have Dr. Ogi Alozi. You've probably seen him around. He's, again, infectious disease specialist, and man, we've been seeing you everywhere. Dr. Armando Mesa, we've been seeing you everywhere. So they're both here to talk about what COVID is, infectious disease. Also, we're looking at the regular flu. And if I could just kind of stop there, and Dr. Alozi, to say infectious disease specialist means something different now than it did a year ago. Yeah, not that it means something different now, it just, there's so much going on. So talk a little bit about your specialty, and Dr. Mesa, this is going to be the same question to you in a moment too. But talk about your specialty and talk about what's been going on in your world over the last 11 months.
So first of all, thanks for having me. This is always a safe place amongst friends. It's ironic that I'm here with Dr. Mesa. He was actually my first boss when I first moved to El Paso in 2010, and so
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. And so I appreciate all the things he's done for me in my career. But I think in terms of infectious diseases, this is the year to be an infectious disease physician, right? Last year, you and I talked about other things, right? HIV, hepatitis C. We never imagined that we would be in the middle of a global pandemic. Talk less of a global pandemic that hit our community as hard as it did. When we went through July and August, we assumed that we had seen the worst, and we hoped we had seen the worst. What happened to our community in October and November, I think, was unfortunate. I think, and I tell people this all the time, and we'll talk about vaccines later, but as we sort of figure out how we're going to get this bridge out of the pandemic, which is vaccines, we got to remember every single life that we've lost, right? And we have to pay them honor and respect by ensuring that our community gets to a place that we can return to whatever semblance of normality is next fall, next winter. And so we're not repeating these mistakes again.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk a little bit because I hear a lot of naysayers. It's a hoax, it's this and that and the other. Dr. Mesa, I would like for you to talk about what's happening with our hospital systems right now. I mean, the hospitals are full. It's not an issue of, oh, well, I haven't heard of it. I don't know anybody that has it, but just what's going on with our healthcare system. And the reason I say that is that we're going to really ask people, again, to wear the mask. If they're going to go out, don't take the whole family with you. Stay away if you can. Don't go outside just for fun. I know everybody wants to shop right now because it's time for the holidays. But in general, talk about the stress on our healthcare system.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It is interesting because when in January, December, everything started, I recall that one of the first questions that we all asked is, how bad is it going to be? You know, there was a lot of concern that we were going to be in a situation that we have been in the past, but I think a lot of people also felt that it was not going to be as bad as it is now. And I think the framework that started with was one of the major issues that we are facing now. So we started with the assumption that it's going to be simple, easy, get rid of it, and we're done.
Right. That was the assumption.
That did not occur.
Yeah.
And that is the big surprise, because then our expectations have changed so much, and then we became a little bit skeptical of what is it that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, this skepticism became the major problem with hospitals. Why? Because even though, yes, there is a small percent of patients, relatively speaking, that end up in the hospital, if you multiply that small number by a big amount of people that are becoming infected, it has really saturated the capacity and exceeded the capacity of our hospitals, and that's what we're dealing with now. So a small problem that apparently was not going to be bigger than just the usual flu, mild, became a much worse situation that we are now facing.
Yeah, and it's all about the numbers at that point. You know, people think, well, there's so many people sick, but it's also the capacity of what a hospital should be taken on any normal, regular day, week, month, et cetera. Dr. Lozzi, what I'd love for you to do is, and I feel like it's almost too simplistic, but for the audience at home that doesn't quite understand, there's the flu that we all know about, which does morph a little bit every year, it mutates a little bit every year, and then there's COVID. In the beginning, people were like, oh, it's just like the flu. If you could physiologically explain, I know, he giggles, but I know it's complex, and I get it. To the best of your ability to help explain to the audience what
so definitely. I think a couple of things. I mean, when I think about flu or influenza, it's a respiratory virus. It usually comes in the winter months when people are congregating more, when their schools are in session, closed quarters. And it's not as if the flu isn't bad, but the flu doesn't do the sort of what we call multi-system damage that coronavirus can do. I think it's also important to understand that even if we're getting to, let's say, 50 or 60% of people that do get the flu vaccine every year, that takes the edge off of what the flu could do in our hospitals.
Bingo.
And even then, I mean, I think people that are not in healthcare don't realize that consistently every January to February, actually December to February, our hospitals are full because of flu. Now, all the hospitals across this city have done an amazing and remarkable job of flexing into supply closets and hallways and the staffing that's happened. But coronavirus, being a very different sort of family of viruses, attachment mechanism, and a host of other sort of scientific things we can go into, the reality is this: our bodies haven't seen the coronavirus before.
Right, exactly.
Right? And so that sort of cytokine storm, that immune response that happens when a new virus hits us, is really what has caused the issue. And so, again, I mean, there's all the politics of it, but here's the reality. We've lost more people from the coronavirus than we did from the flu in the last decade, combined.
In the last decade.
Right.
Say that again and say it
We've
slow.
lost more people from the coronavirus in El Paso than we've lost from the flu in the last decade. Right? And I think that is staggering.
Yeah.
That hits home. And so for the deniers that say it's just like the flu, I often say to people that call me and say, hey, well, come visit our hospitals. Come to UMC, come to the Hospitals of Providence, come to Las Palmas del Sol, and walk around, right? What you don't want to be is upside down on a ventilator.
Right, exactly.
That's not how you want to end up. And so, again, I think that's the easiest thing that you can sort of tell people.
So let's talk, and Dr. Mesa, I'm probably going to help you out here a little bit, but let's talk about right now the importance of getting the flu vaccine. If you haven't gotten your flu shot yet, we're looking in the middle of December right now. Where can we get it? So what I have here, if you can go to epstrong.org, in that website you will see areas where you can get the flu shot for free. And on that note, we were just, if you can piggyback on what Dr. Lozzi was saying, how can the flu shot help guard you? And the way that I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a vaccination that's going into your body, it does get all of your antibodies kind of going like, you know what, there's something going on, there's inside of me, and it kind of helps also with everything, just warding everything off for a while. Is that something that you can explain? Like, what does a flu shot do?
Yeah, well, let's start with the concept of a vaccine. A vaccine is a very simple process that allows your body to be exposed to a microbe, in this case, a virus, the influenza virus, and develop a protective response that is going to prevent you from becoming sick from the infection, from the illness. And vaccinations have been used and proven to work for many, many decades. And I know that there's people who always going to be skeptical, who probably feel that vaccinations have a side effect profile that they don't understand and they don't like. But what we know for sure is that, and we have forgotten as a society, that vaccines have saved lives and have saved us from the diseases that we have never, many of us, seen. So if you compare poliomyelitis, for example, you know, it's a disease that used to cripple a lot of people. Now we don't see those cases. We sometimes see patients who had polio syndrome. So vaccines, influenza vaccine is the most important intervention you can make to prevent yourself in the winter, especially from getting sick with this virus.
Right.
And the protection that you're going to get is going to be not only to that virus, but potentially to other viruses. Now we know for sure that the COVID vaccine is going to be the one that's really going to be helpful for that specific virus, but there's always a little bit of cross immunity. That is that there will be some partial protection. We know that other interventions like the tuberculosis vaccination that is given in some countries also does that effect to your body. So there is a little bit of that, but definitely for the influenza, the vaccine is the best intervention. And the extra protection that you get, in my view, is that you're not going to get the influenza and COVID.
Exactly.
So you're really saving yourself from a double trouble that can send you to the hospital.
Absolutely. And while you were speaking, I finally found what I was looking for. So if you can call just on your telephone, 211 for flu vaccination locations. You can go to any of the drugstores that will do that. Most insurances, in fact, all insurances will cover that. And again, go to epstrong.org to find out where there are free flu vaccination clinics, and those are happening every weekend. And it's great because you can stay in your car. People are giving you the flu shot while you're in the car. There's really no excuse to do it. This will be the one and only time that I say, yes, pack the family in the car so that everybody can get their flu shot. Other than that, don't pack everybody in the car. Go alone if you need to go out. I mean, really, it's one of those situations. Dr. Lozzi, we spoke just a little bit prior to the program of what's happening with the FDA. And actually, Dr. Mesa, you gave me the perfect wording here. So FDA gave the EUA, which is the Emergency Use Authorization, which happened just about 2 hours ago. And now there's that process of the FDA actually doing the stamp and the check mark on that. For those of us that are not in the medical community, how does that work? What is that process, and how does that work? For example, there was a vote that was 17-4, and the 4 was just, again, there's not a lot of information on 17 and 18-year-olds, but we're looking at having that vaccine go
16,
forward.
yeah.
Is it 16? So
however that works, but the process, I think, is fascinating because you hear about it all the time, but we don't know what it really means, what's involved.
Yeah, so I think any drug that comes through actually goes to an FDA independent advisory panel, and they look at the data. And so some of that data has been available. There was a 92-page document that was released on Tuesday. I think I read it over last night. There's a lot of data in it. And those 17 experts, be it Paul Offit, that's at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, I think Dr. Peter Hotez, who's in charge of sort of the global public health school in Houston, a host of other experts like that across the country are looking at the data. They'll run their own assessment of the data, right? So every company has to give the FDA's panel their own data set and say, okay, you look at it.
So it's like
not
a peer
just
review.
spun. Yeah, it's not just spun and you bring a couple of PowerPoints and you present and they vote off of that, right? They look at the data, they're allowed to examine the data. And I think we've sort of known, not just from the press releases that have come out in the last couple of weeks, but looking at this preliminary data, that 95% is legit, right? And you look at the curves start to splay after 10 days, right? And I think that really starts to form the crux of the efficacy, that 95%. And so again, the FDA will look at that review panel's information. They'll sit tomorrow. Every expectation is that the FDA will approve this. And from what I understand, and talking to some people already, they're already moving vaccines to distribution sites overnight, yesterday, today. And so some places are actually planning to start giving vaccine by this weekend if they get vaccine. And so this is an exciting time. I mean, in as much as 2020 has been painful, sort of tiring, tedious for a host of people, and like I said, the losses of lives, the way science has sort of stepped up to the plate when it's been allowed to activate in its own space has been remarkable and breathtaking, right? But I will say one other thing about vaccine. A lot of people say, well, why am I going to take the vaccine? It just only has 6 or 7 months. What people don't realize, and I think it's really important to tell people, is that SARS, the original SARS, was 2002. The Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus was 2012, a cousin of SARS, right? So they had all these cousins coming along, and science found the spike protein, the M spike protein, almost a decade ago. They knew that was the back door to stop these vaccines. The scale of the pandemic pulled everything into hyperdrive, right? Warp speed, as this government said. And so nothing was surprising here. If you look back at some of the data from February and March, we probably had the answer then, but they took their time, they were deliberate, they were diligent and dedicated around the process to get it to where we are today. And these are some exciting times going into 2021.
Agreed. And Dr. Mess, I'd like for you to kind of piggyback on that because there are, if I understand the numbers right, I heard today that there's about 40% of Americans who are afraid to take the vaccine, when it does come out. So what I'd like to do here with 2 medical professionals, 2 infectious disease docs, specialists, talk to the audience as to why they should actually take the COVID vaccine when it comes out. It's a selling point, but again, they hear it on the news, but they don't really get to hear it from El Paso docs, from our neighbors, etc. Why should they take the vaccine, or why should they not be afraid to take the vaccine?
It's interesting about how we make decisions in life. And a lot of the times when we make decisions, there is a lot of emotion that comes from it. And I think there will be a group of individuals that unfortunately, no matter how much information we provide, they're still not going to feel comfortable. So those are going to be very difficult to persuade to get vaccinated. And I understand the rationale. There is such situation. The other scenario is really looking at the data, what the FDA does, and look at the evidence that we have that vaccines work. And if you want to think about the pros and the cons, I always say, think about the disease itself first. Think about it as a vaccine. If you were to get a vaccine by getting the disease, you know the mortality. You know how many people are dying. You know how many people are end up in the hospital compared to the information that is available from the studies well done with a lot of budget into the development of this vaccine. You have a much safer way of protecting yourself from this disease by getting vaccinated. So vaccines are not going to be ever administered and given and approved because of just the safety of these products. So you have to make sure that when the vaccines are given, they have the efficacy trial, the information, but also the safety trial.
Right.
And all the experts that they've been very vocal on all the media, they clearly have stated that the efficacy is important, but the safety is more important, because you cannot make a patient who's not sick, feel better. They need to be healthy when they get the vaccine, and they're going to be protected with a minimum of side effects from getting vaccinated.
Beautifully said. I have a question here from the audience, and I do want to honor this because it's about the idea of the vaccine. So the question is, if someone who has lots of allergies and is prone to anaphylactic shock, what can they do to prevent an adverse reaction? So there were 2 healthcare workers in Great Britain, so that was kind of thing, but these were people who had a lot of allergies anyway. So it's kind of like those pre-existing conditions, this and that and the other. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it is a question that some people have versus the regular people.
Absolutely. And so I think, again, 44,000 in one study, 30,000 in another study. We're seeing how the United Kingdom is rolling it out, how Canada is rolling it out. And so the reality is this. They had those 2 people that had unfortunate reactions to the vaccine. They did well, they survived everything. And so I think the recommendation right now is that if you know that you have known anaphylaxis, you have known severe allergies, and for me, that definition is, do you carry an EpiPen, right? If you're somebody that has an EpiPen and that is part of your life, you probably want to take a pass on this first round, right? You're not that person. I think sort of going back to what Dr. Mesa said around the populations that are going to take it, I think COVID has had a tremendous burden on our long-term care facility populations. Approximately 40% of all the deaths in the United States have been in people in long-term care facilities. We got to protect those people first, right? And so those are the people we're going to protect first. Our healthcare workers who are dealing with COVID patients day in and day out, they have to be protected first, tier 1, what they're calling tier 1. Thereafter, it becomes a sort of scale process. What's available, who wants to take it, and I don't fault anybody if they say, I'm not ready, right? Okay, you're not ready, physically distance, wear a mask, watch your symptoms, and don't spread COVID, don't get COVID. Don't share air with other people. I think that's really what it boils down to.
Bingo.
There may come a time when you will be ready, right? Moderna's coming down the pike. Johnson & Johnson, there's some concerns about AstraZeneca, but we can figure those out later. There are going to be multiple options around vaccines. We need to probably get to a ballpark of 70 to 80% either that have been infected or that have been vaccinated for us to sort of get our lives back. And so we need people to get vaccinated, but we need to protect those that are at the highest risk of death first.
Absolutely. I have another question here from the audience, and I think this is the ongoing question. I don't know if we have an answer, but we hear often in our lives, well, flu season is coming. COVID-19 doesn't seem to have a season. So far, it is a seasonless and a persistent virus that's happening. SARS, you were talking about SARS. I don't think that was a season either. But on this thought process of, and we don't know yet either, how long is the vaccine going to last? We just don't know yet. It could be a year. Flu vaccines, you get that every year. Maybe it's a couple of years. Question from the audience, though, how or what viruses are seasonal and which viruses are just persistent all season long, and why is the question. And if we don't have an answer, we don't have an answer. Again, I'm just trying to honor the question from the audience.
Well, we know that some viruses, like the influenza virus, tend to be more seasonal because there are some climate changes that happen in the winter, obviously, and there's been probably some increase of the transmission rates during that time period that makes that infection to be more prevalent. Now, remember that influenza, it really has not a high transmission rate as compared to COVID. And therefore, the ability from one person to pass to another is going to be probably something related to being indoors. So if the weather is a factor, then, some viruses will be more common in the winter. Now, when you have a virus that can spread widespread without really not much else than just sharing a space, even in a relatively open space, then you're going to see it throughout. The thing with the coronaviruses is that they have been around for a long time, too. So this is not something new. We've dealt with it in the past, and there's already, history of viruses in our community that we have dealt with. So this new virus is probably going to stay in the community, It's going to be like in the background, and that's why the vaccine is going to be helpful, because that will be protecting us. And most likely, even though we don't have the data, it's not going to be a seasonal protection. We're going to be protected for the longer run, hopefully you with 1 dose or 2 doses, which is the series.
Right.
But we may need a booster. And if that is the need, I'm fine with it. I
Absolutely.
don't have a problem with getting another shot. So this virus will stay, but we can prevent the damages that can cause to our system and to the community by getting vaccinated.
Agreed. Agreed. And again, I want to give some shout outs to the American Heart Association, who is underwriting the program today. And if we can put up slide number 1, Gracie is our rock star in the back. But again, some of the questions are, if I had COVID-19 and antibodies and now I'm fine, is it still okay for me to get the flu shot, et cetera? So those are some of the questions that are on the line right now. Protecting your kids, and this is a great statistic, getting your kids vaccinated reduces their chances of flu-related hospitalizations by 74%. So the big thing with COVID-19 is, yes, I know some people, you know some people, I got a little sick, but they weren't hospitalized. And then there are those that are hospitalized, and then there's ICU, then there's ventilators. So there is a gamut out there, and what we're trying to avoid is hospitalization. That's the big thing. That's where the stress is coming. I wanted to throw out another website. It's heart.org/flu. You can go there too and go to the local area where you can figure out where to get a flu shot. Again, there are free flu shot clinics going on all the time. The El Paso County Medical Society, you can telephone them or go to their website also, because it's super duper important to be able to do that. People, again, high risk categories. If you're 65 plus, if you have diabetes, absolutely go get the flu shot. Dr. Mesa, you are right there nodding your head. So diabetes is another question I wanted to talk about. And since I saw you nodding your head out of the side of my eye, he giggles because that's how it happens. Talk about diabetes and obesity, because the last show that we did regarding COVID-19 had to do with asthma. And in my head, I thought, well, people who have asthma are at really high risk. But diabetes and obesity are a big thing. If you can kind of talk about that when it comes to COVID-19 and be able to fight it off.
Yeah, I think that diabetes, as we all know, it's a condition that is called a metabolic disease. That is, that it affects not only your blood sugar levels, but it affects your overall system. And one of the areas that you see most affected is your ability to fight back infections, especially for those diabetics who are not well controlled.
Right.
So the fact that you have diabetes by itself may not be necessarily a factor of prognosis, other than that if you are uncontrolled and you have high glucose, your immune system is not going to be able to fight back infections. Now, when we are exposed to any particular virus or bacteria, the defense system, if it acts right away, if it is a rapid response, you actually can contain the infection very easily and with minimal symptoms. The problem happens when that doesn't occur and the virus or the bacteria can spread out into your system, and that's what causes the problems that we see. In the patient population, talking about obesity, one of the things that is being found that is associated is obesity is a metabolic problem as well. So
Right.
it's pretty related to diabetes in a way. And we know that the breathing problems that have surfaced in patients who end up in the hospital has been exacerbated, made it worse by the fact that they were in a higher weight than their ideal body weight.
Okay.
So there is a combination of the two. Diseases usually don't happen in isolation. As I always mention, there's always a combination of factors that make things go worse. So a overweight patient and diabetic with poor control will have a much worse clinical presentation and course if they get infected with either influenza or COVID because of those two conditions.
So here is, and again, almost too simple of a question. However, the treatment, I mean, so we're looking at therapeutics that have progressed over the last 11 months or so. When someone is hospitalized, let's say last year, 2 years ago, and they're hospitalized with the flu, what kind of treatment modalities would they have gotten then? Is that a loaded question?
It's not a loaded question. I just
And then-
I laughed because it was a different reason. Go for it.
And then also when you're looking now, because COVID-19, as the time goes, you will find that this is working a little bit better, this is working a little bit better, this is working a little bit better. So because this is kind of a flu/COVID show, I want to talk about flu, how to get somebody out of the hospital, how to prevent them from getting pneumonia, you know, if they have pneumonia, how do you get them better, et cetera, and then kind of carry that over to what's going on with COVID.
Yeah, so I think the important thing, irrespective of whether it's flu or COVID, is early detection and early treatment. Right? I think that's really the key. It's going somewhere where you can get a test, get that nasal swab to determine whether you have influenza, strep throat, or COVID-19, right? And then if you do, there's a host of various treatments that you can get early. And the earlier they are, the better they are for you. What you don't want to do is be ending up in a hospital with either entity and be sick, have multi-lobe pneumonia, have fever, have organ failure. It's too late at that point in time,
Right.
And so I think it's very important for people, whether it's now, whether it's a year from now, a year prior to now, if you're sick and it's that season, go get checked, right? Which is really where the power of the primary care doctors, the urgent cares, potentially the ERs, right? The freestanding ERs play their role because they're able to do a lot of these tests, get you in and out. In terms of the treatment around COVID, I mean, there's so many things, right, that have been thrown out.
Oh, I know.
You throw everything against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
I mean, the data's all over the place. There are those that want to take ivermectin, vitamin D, vitamin C. I don't have a problem if you want to take those things. In the hospital, it's a different cocktail of medications. Some seem to reduce the days you're in. None really seems to change how well, whether you live or die, except for, interestingly enough, one of the oldest medications we have, which is dexamethasone. Simple steroids, right? They're not $1,000 or $5,000. $20 will get you a course of steroids. And so it's ironic, and I think in the post-mortem of COVID, be it next year or 2 years from now, we'll look back and really see how healthcare and science sort of collided, right, with the politics and the emotion that Dr. Mesa talked about. And hopefully we can learn some things for the next time that we have a global pandemic or crisis.
Yeah, for the next time, let's hope there's not a next time for a really long time. We talk about this being the century. You know, we had the big 1918. Another question here from the audience. And this is not something that we may have the answer to, but the question is, what is in the Pfizer vaccine? And I think that's going to, when we talked about if you are allergic to certain things that might be in the vaccine, what could that be? Like eggs? I feel like with the flu vaccine, I always get asked, hey, are you allergic to eggs? Have you had any issues with that? I don't know what's in there. You guys may not know what's in there. I don't know. But I'm honoring that question too from the audience. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about antibodies that we are all still learning about too. But in the Pfizer vaccine, what might be what someone is allergic to in there? And I'm throwing that to either one of you. And if we don't know, we don't know. That's why we have a disclaimer at the beginning of the show. Sometimes we don't have the answer.
So,
And you guys can't get sued for giving the wrong answer because we're giving as much information.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
as much as I can.
like I said, I read the packet the other day, and I'm blocking.
The 90-page packet?
Yeah,
Dear
I'm
Lord.
blocking on what's in there. It didn't have any adjuvants that are egg-related or specifically all the formaldehyde and a lot of things that other people talk about. I can't remember exactly what the base of it is, but it was actually intriguing to see that people had that bad of an anaphylactic reaction, right? And so
Right.
it's unclear whether it was a random reaction, whether it was emotionally driven, whether it was actually the components of the vaccine. I think the same conversation is about the Bell's palsy, right? It was
Right.
4 people. And
Right.
again, I think people have to understand that in a given year, you probably have between 15 and 30 people per 100,000 that get Bell's palsy anyway. So that 4 is within the population distribution. What was interesting is that it didn't happen in the placebo group, right? And so that's where the concern is. That happened in the vaccine group and not the other. But Dr. Mesa?
Yeah, I think, well, the formulation for the vaccine comes in we call it like a dry component first, and then it has to be reconstituted with some water and salt.
Okay.
And obviously it comes in a vial, so potentially you can find something in the vial that is being prepared with that can be someone allergic to. The component is actually, it's just genetic material with a little bit of lipids coating it, and it's pretty simple structure. So you are not manipulating with egg or embryos or any kind of external cellular component that is foreign to your body.
Right.
So from that point of view, it is unlikely that that is the reason why this individual developed the reaction. It could be very simple formulation, packaging, or something that may have, in a way, got into the vaccine, and that's what caused it. Now, we need to also account that it can be just coincidence. Can be just it just happened because it just happened to happen at the same time, because it's very difficult to control exactly what's going on at the time that you get your vaccine. Right. So that's also a possibility. But the safety is pretty good, and the reactions have been really small and very limited for most patients.
I'm going to honor this question too, because it talks about exactly what we're talking about right now. Is it safe? And that's such a hard way of talking about it. But again, these are people that have fibrosis in the lungs, autoimmune different conditions that they have, hepatitis, cirrhosis, a stent. If there's any of those that ring true, like, hey, we should talk about that, let's do. If not, we can go on to the next question.
I mean, I think it's important to also understand, right, that if you look at the subgroups in this trial, whether it was men, women, African-American, Hispanic, Caucasian, older, younger, the breakdowns played across all subpopulations, right? The efficacy or the ability of the vaccine to protect against mild, moderate, and severe disease was consistent. Now, there's a host of things that person sort of mentioned, whether it's fibrosis, liver disease, hepatitis. I mean, as a primarily HIV physician and ID, I plan to recommend it for my patients that are sick or at risk, and so we'll kind of go from there. But none of the things that they called out are specifically called out in the packaging or the data so far.
Okay. Antibodies, and this is probably not for this show, but it is still something that's fascinating to me. So there are people who were diagnosed with COVID that may not have had any symptoms whatsoever, or let's just say very mild symptoms. And then there are people who really had a difficult time, but they're recovered now. The antibodies in the person who didn't show a lot of symptoms, would they be the same as the person who really had a hard time in the hospital for a month? It's a question that, again, if we don't have an answer, at the end of the day, this is a novel thing. It's new, we're figuring it out as we go. I'm throwing out questions that people are throwing my way, but I am in no way expecting to have a real answer on that.
Great questions.
Actually, there's data that shows clearly that getting sick from COVID, the antibody response is not as good as the vaccine. So if you want to look into what is it that the vaccine is giving you as an advantage, is that the amount of titers that you're developing actually are consistently higher when you get the vaccination. So you can get antibodies, especially the ones that are commercially available, but they don't really tell you the rest of the story. The rest of the story is really when the vaccine that has been studied showed that the production of those antibodies is very strong, and it's been demonstrated that it lasts for a significant amount of time. So we right now do not know for sure what's, if any, the protection that we're going to get from getting sick with COVID. We know there's going to be some protection, but also there's been a few cases of people getting reinfected, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But again, the data is very solid that these vaccines do protect much better than getting sick with SARS-CoV-2 virus, and therefore that's why you need to get vaccinated.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing too, right, is, sorry, people always ask me, should I go get my antibody test? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question, because what is it going to tell you?
Exactly.
If it's negative, it doesn't mean that you didn't mount a response. And if it's positive, it doesn't mean that your response is long-term, right? And again, I think the commercially available antibody tests are what they use in research labs to actually determine if you have immunity. There's also some natural killer cell immunity that's quiescent or sits in the background. And so all of those things really determine your immunity picture. And myself and Dr. Mesa may get this at the same time, have a very different response, right? And so that's why vaccines are going to be so important.
I have a question here from the audience, and it's one that if you're in the world of health, it's different. But when I get a shot, I feel like I'm sick for the next day or two. Why is that? I think that's such an important question, because that is what is supposed to happen, because your body's fighting off what you just put into it. I would love for one of you, Dr. Mesa, it's just your turn. That's how, it's like a ping
No,
pong
we
table.
can share. We can share.
But I love that question because some people are like, well, when I get the flu shot, then I get sick for a day or two, so I don't want to get it. But there's a reason for that. Please.
So let's start with the most important message.
Okay.
Vaccines for influenza are not going to give you influenza. Let's start with that. Okay?
Yes.
There is a reaction that is actually what you want to the stimulus that the vaccination is going to give to your body. The reaction of a little bit of pain, maybe a little bit of fever, those are the findings that your body is telling you that you are going to be protected with.
I'm fighting this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you get the vaccine for COVID, the same thing should be actually expected. And what they have shown is that those side effects tend to last just a few days, if any, and they can be easily treated or managed with medication like, acetaminophen, things for fever or for pain. So the side effect profile is so benign and so short-limited that really should not be a problem. Now, yes, if you're going to vaccinate, all your staff, well, expect probably the next day that they're probably going to call the day, off or something. So you have to be careful with how you're going to give those vaccines so you don't get into that kind of situation. But that compared to, again, the non-getting the vaccination for influenza or COVID, there's really no comparison. I think this is very clear from that point of view. And the most important thing is, again, is vaccines do not give you the disease. There is no way, because the way they are formulated do not allow you to get exposed to the whole virus.
Repeat that, because that's something that people are so concerned about. Yeah. I hear about it all the time. Vaccines do not
give you influenza, are not going to give you COVID, because they are not the entire viral particles. They are just pieces that your body is fighting or create an antibody against.
Exactly.
Protecting you from getting sick.
Yay, I'm glad that we got that out. Another question here from the audience. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to make an announcement. I want to say thanks to Patsy Slaughter with the El Paso County Medical Society. She texted in and said there are free flu shots Christmas Eve at the outlet shops. So way west side, but free flu shots from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And again, that is drive-through. And also for other places, again, go to El Paso EP Strong. My apologies, EP Strong for elpasostrong.org. Super important. Question here from the audience. And I don't know how we would even answer this, but the question is, I'm just going to read it cold. How can healthcare staff tell if someone has received the vaccine? And maybe it's someone who is not responsive. Maybe that's what the question is here. What will prevent people from getting vaccinated more than once? Well, we did talk about, at least with Pfizer, there is one vaccine and then you will need a booster. I guess the question is, can a healthcare worker tell if you've been vaccinated? I don't know if there's an answer to that, but again, it's from the audience.
There's no good answer to that. At the moment, no. It's sort of on the honor system. I mean, the CDC and the FDA have talked about creating a digital card that can go on your phone, or a vaccine card that shows, right? And again, I think this is sort of a longer term conversation, but we're going to get to a point globally where the United States and certain countries have more access to vaccines than others. And to protect various countries from a socioeconomic standpoint, a travel standpoint, the Olympics are supposed to be next year.
Yep.
You're probably going to get to a point where to travel to certain places, you're going to need to show a vaccine card that you've received a COVID vaccine. And so I think from a sort of clinical standpoint, you're not going to know. You could do a blood test, but again, the blood tests that are commercially available are not the things that we need to make that determination. And so people are going to have their vaccine cards, whether it's paper or electronic.
And I think that's a great thing. And I just have to say, my nephew from Germany is sailing in the Tokyo Olympics. He was,
oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Very
So
cool.
he's all over it. He's like trying to, following this like crazy. I've been corrected on something, which is even better. So there are free flu shots being given out through December 24th, not just on December 24th. My apologies for that, but it's a very, very big correction. So again, from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock every single day, outlet shops of El Paso, free flu shots. Go get them done. Again, that's the one time that I say, take the whole family with you in the car. Don't go shopping. No, I'm just saying, you shop, but be very, very careful. I wanted to, actually, what I want to do is stop the questions from the audience, because I feel like there's so much that you've got inside of your head that you want to tell people. There's so much that you have inside of your head that you want to tell people. We can talk about, like this PSA that you and I were working on, right? It's not just about wash your hands, wear a mask. It's about not taking everybody with you. It's all that good stuff. But I'm going to kind of hold off here for a second because you know the drill. Say whatever it is that you want to say. If we've hit base on it yet, or if we haven't touched base on it yet, or if you just want to make a point, and you're going to have the same situation, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I mean, from a sort of community standpoint, we are where we are, right? We can't sort of do revisionist history on how we got here and everything else. I think our hospitals across the city are better today than they were 2 weeks ago. The Thanksgiving sort of surge on top of a surge hasn't yet hit from the numbers that we're seeing from the city-county dashboard, and that's a good thing. I think people have to, however, remain diligent, right? It's not enough to say, well, oh, it's great, it's gone. We can do whatever we want again, right? This wasn't the year to have the 20-person Thanksgiving, and it's not going to be the year to have the 20-person Christmas. And I get that people miss their families and miss the socialization aspect of our community, but we're getting closer to a point where we can come out of this safely and on the back end. Multiple organizations across the city already signing waivers and consents to get vaccines. In the next 30 to 60 days, we'll get that sort of first tier hopefully out of the way. Moderna will come on board. There'll be a host more vaccines coming, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca next year. And again, I think if people understand that there's hope, and that we have a pathway out of this, and that pathway isn't the dreaded lockdowns or shutdowns. And that's a whole different conversation where I think we sort of failed ourselves by terming them such a negative language, right? But I think if people are given that hope to say that we have a way out of this, we have a way to get our community, I mean, we got to get our kids back to school.
Right.
Right? I mean, if nothing else, and now I'm just going off on a tangent.
No, but you need to, because this is what people want to hear.
Here's the thing. If nothing else, we got to get our kids back to school.
Right.
Our kids form the foundation of everything else that we do in this community.
Absolutely.
It allows parents to go to work. It allows places to open up. It allows people to move, right? And it allows our kids who have really suffered through this process, right? And I get it. Some people have access and a lot don't, right? But it allows our kids to get back to school and socialize and learn. And that allows our community as a whole to move forward. So we're almost there. We need to get there. We need to continue to be diligent, mask up, physical distance, but we have light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that's exciting.
It is, and you said that word, hope. It's such a big word, and again, what I said in the beginning, we're not there yet, so don't let the guard down. That's so important. Christmas is coming up, and this is what I did on the last show. It's just me and my little pod at home, you know, Sonny Boy and the daughter. What are you doing for Christmas? And when I want you to answer, if you have people coming over, don't tell me. What are you doing for Christmas?
Well, I'm going to be working not in Christmas, but
Okay.
right before Christmas.
Well, I guess my question is, are you having people come over?
No.
Good
I'm
boy.
not- yeah.
All right, sorry, good boy. That was a terrible thing to say. But that's kind of my point. It is, I saw in my neighborhood, we live in the same neighborhood, but I saw in my neighborhood, there, you know, a couple of houses, not many, a couple of houses that had 6, 7, 8 cars outside. And I was, you know, riding my bike. I ate, did a little bike ride. I'm like, what's going on? I felt like going up to the door and saying, what are you guys doing? So that's super duper important. On the note that I gave to Dr. Lozzi, talk to us about what you want people to hear. Your spiel.
Thank you. I think this is the time for those individuals who ever thought that vaccinations were an issue that they had to deal with. I'm going to put it in a way that is, you know, I have to make a decision. This is the best time
Right.
to reanalyze what is it that you are getting with the vaccine and what is it that you're missing not getting a vaccine. I see the development of these vaccinations very similar to the way that the influenza vaccine has developed over the years. If you think about it, there is now one kind of vaccine for, I'm going to say, every excuse people have not to get a vaccine.
Right.
Because if you are allergic to egg products and there is a vaccine that doesn't have
There's
that.
an alternative.
If you don't like to have, you know, an injection, there are even vaccines that are with the small needles, but they are not like the big injection. There's always some vaccine that is going to be good for you. So if influenza vaccine has evolved to give you that option, I think that you should get it because
Right.
you are going to be able to get the vaccine with the protection that you need. In the same kind of category of thinking, you have to think that this vaccine that is coming, maybe the one that is right now available may not be of your liking. Maybe you don't want to get it, but there will be a vaccine that will be the one that you will benefit the most. I think that all vaccines are going to be helpful. Maybe the one who has a side effect profile that will be more likely for you to be acceptable and get it. But vaccinations are proven, if anything, to be the best interventions that science has developed that is only going to make us more protected and have a healthier community and not really go through this again. I honestly
Right.
fear that the situation that we have been through is going to be repeated, especially in El Paso.
Yeah, because it is. It's all about familia. It's
It's been bad. It's been really
has
terrible.
Has been bad. And on that note too, and I want to address this because I was tested, so that means I'm allowed to go to grandma's house. I was tested and I'm negative, so that means I get to go hang out with Tia and Tio. I would love for one of you, and Dr. Lozzi, it's just your turn. There's that time frame where you get tested, you get the result back, but it could be that you have COVID, you don't know it yet, it hasn't been in your system long enough for a test to pick it up, etc. So there's that false sense of security that so many people have, like the people that are traveling and you know, man on the street interviews in the airport, oh, I took my test yesterday, I'm negative, I'm fine, I'm gonna go see my grandma, whatever. Address that if you could.
Yeah, I mean, this is really simple to me. A test is a test is a test, right? The test is the day of the test. It's like somebody telling me, well, I had $20 in my bank account yesterday and I spent it, but I still have $20. I mean, this is fantasy thinking, right? The day you do the test is the day that you know you're negative. Anything after that and potentially before that
Bingo. And that's
is
the part I'm talking
problematic,
about,
right?
yes.
Because you could be developing virus. The virus
Yes.
doesn't go from 0 to 100 real quick in under a day. It develops over 3, 5, sometimes 7 days. So if you get tested on day 3, 5, and 6, you're negative. Day 7 to 14, you're positive and spreading at grandma's house. And again, I think one thing, and this is sort of you and I talked about, right, messaging. One thing about the messaging of COVID has been, I feel as if we've given people only black and white answers. There has to be nuance to human life, right? And I've said that abstinence didn't work for HIV in the 80s and 90s, and abstinence isn't gonna work for COVID, right? That's why we have the fatigue. We gotta give people the tools to do this rationally, right? If you get a test, that's great for that day, but not for tomorrow and not for the day after. So continue to mask, continue to try to physical distance. I understand that people are making decisions that probably aren't the best societal decisions, but they're the best for them. And they need to understand that they shouldn't rationalize it just because they had a test. And I think that's really what it boils down to.
And rationalizing too, this is something that I talked about with another doctor just recently. It's we all let our guard down around someone who we know. I was talking to you about our neighbors, the Blooms, right? And I was on my bike ride, 'cause that's what I do for my exercise. And I stop, I'm talking to Francis, we're this close, and all of a sudden it's like I realize, oh, I need to step back a little bit. Because we forget, because there's someone that, oh, of course you don't have COVID because you got, of course you don't.
You're my neighbor.
You're my neighbor. You know, we see each other all the time, but we do let our guard down. And anything you'd like to add to that? And then other than that, I'm going to start giving out websites and phone numbers again. But
well,
the
it's
thing
going
about
to be a new normal. We're going to have to get used to it, and it's going to take some time. Wearing a face mask is something that I have never done up until now in a consistent and to this degree. And a comment about the test. You know, tests are not necessarily a way to make a diagnosis. It's a way to confirm what you're already suspecting. So that's why there's no 100% sensitive and specific test. Every test is going to have a margin of error.
Right.
The way that you reduce the margin of error is when you apply it to the right patient population. So if you have symptoms that are consistent with a disease, influenza is a good example. If you get a flu test, influenza exam in the winter, and it's positive, there is a very good chance that that's what you have.
right.
So because the risk is very high, and that's what happens with testing. I think that probably we all felt that maybe the test was going to tell us the black and white answer.
Right, right.
And I think a lot of people got discouraged by saying, well, because I understand there's less testing now being done than before. And people say, well, why are not people going and getting tested? Well, because they wanted a black and white answer. And that is not necessarily what tests do. They help you, but they are not the solution to, and that's why you need a medical provider to help you out.
Exactly, exactly. And again, don't rest on it. Again, I want to say thank you to the American Heart Association. If you get your flu shot, you are 6 times less likely to die of a heart attack if you have the flu. So again, the flu is like, oh, now we look at the flu, it's like, oh, it's just the flu. The flu is still a pretty big thing. So again, flu shots, free flu shots at the outlet shops, 11 o'clock to 5 p.m. every single day through December 24th. There is on your screen right there. Just thinking about skipping the flu shot, don't. It does matter. Get it if you haven't gotten it yet. It will continue helping you out through the rest of the spring as well. And I also wanted to give out the website of epstrong.org. It's always a good website just to see what's happening in the world right now. And there was a question here, and I don't have an answer for it. Dr. Oloz, you were talking about Tier 1 and Tier 2. There was a gentleman that says, bless you, there was a COVID. Sorry, that's a joke in our house. If somebody coughs, we run away. But a question was here. I am 69 years old. Wanted to know when I might be, I guess he's asking what tier he's in. I don't know if we can quickly talk about that. I know frontline workers, healthcare workers,
frontline workers, healthcare workers, long-term care facilities are all Tier 1. That person would go into Tier 2.
Okay.
The sort of best sort of gestalt to go, New York Times opinion piece that was over the weekend. It actually has you put in your age and what you do, and it'll rank you.
Oh,
So,
look at that. Okay.
Great website to go to, New York Times opinion on Sunday.
Okay, New York Times, so that's beautiful because I didn't know exactly the tiers either. And also, I know this show went really, really fast. If you want to watch this again, if you want to get this information again, there are several different places you can go to. You can go to www.pbselpaso.org. You can also go to the El Paso County Medical Society's website, and that's a COM, but that's www.epcms.com. So both of those places will have information going up. And Kristen, you knocked it out of the park tonight. So Kristen, again, we joke a little bit, but Hemsdorfer, I love saying her name, really did a great job. And so again, as you know, this is a live program. We're going to have several more. And as things progress, we're going to have both of you guys back here and really talk about vaccines when the Tier 1, when we start moving to Tier 2 and Tier 3, how that's going to be happening, how the distribution is going to be going on. I know that Walgreens and CVS's are already on board. There's also going to be places where people do that. So thank you for watching. This has been a special edition of the El Paso Physician. I'm Catherine Berg. Good night.